Shabbat Shalom, my friends. As I suggested last week, let's just raise up those two words, Shabbat Shalom. Let their meaning, their essence, dwell within us. There's been so much stress, so much fear, so much frustration, so much anxiety, so much anger, so much helplessness, so much despair. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat HaMalkah, the Sabbath bride, is at hand. Let's welcome her with a warm embrace. Hinehi Yoredet, HaKadosha HaBarucha. She is descending now into our midst, clothed in holiness and blessing. Let's just take a deep breath. Shabbat Shalom. Okay. Ha'olam dofek al dati. The world is knocking at my door. The outside world, as a matter of fact, it's doing more than knocking on the door. It's banging hard on my door, and probably, my friends, on your doors as well. I can pretend not to hear, but the knocking continues now relentlessly. As a child of God, as a member of the human community, I know that I must respond. November 3rd, and the end of our national elections is very close at hand. My mind backtracks to the Intana Tokef of our High Holy Day liturgy. Who shall live and who shall die? Normally, I try to stay away from hysterical exaggerations, generally, but I can't always manage to do that. I believe that it's not an exaggeration, however, and whether it's hysterical or not, but to hold on to the belief that we are in a do or die moment of American democracy. And not surprisingly, our Sedra, the second Sedra in our annual Torah cycle, the Sedra known as Noach, Noah, speaks just by chance directly to the moment in which we find ourselves. It's a miracle. We know the story. Sinning people everywhere, an angry God, a simple, upright man who under God's direction builds an ark and loads it with all manner of animals and prepares for a world-destroying flood. The flood ends. A dove returns to the ark with an olive branch in its beak. Dry land has appeared. A rainbow manifests itself. A covenant then is made with all of humanity, and the world begins anew, with Noah assuming the role of a second Adam. But the haunting words of Genesis that we read last week still won't leave us, despite that magnificent rainbow. V'chol yetzer machshavot libo rak ra kol hayom. All of humanity, creatures of God, all are filled to overflowing with the potential to do evil. In filmmaking, a MacGuffin is an object or device that serves as a trigger for the plot. You see the MacGuffin early. It appears to be totally incidental and without significance, but at the end of the day, nothing is more important to the closing of the plot than that MacGuffin. The authors of Genesis have set out a MacGuffin for us. We are told that humanity is filled with the potential for evil. Then it ends. Then we get to the story of Noah. Keep that thought in mind. because the propensity to do evil is a MacGuffin. It's going to rise up and bite us very quickly in our narrative. So, go back to the story. Noah's family establishes itself after the flood. The animals are released from the ark. Vegetation flourishes. Birds are singing. Humankind settles in a valley and then decides to build a city, and in the midst of that city, a tower that will reach up to the very heavens. But when God saw what they were doing, God became very upset. God saw that this tower somehow could be a threat and a challenge. So, our Sedra says, God confused their speech. The Hebrew phrase, Balal Adonai Sfat Kol Haaretz, Balal, confused, so that the tower was called from Balal, Bavel, Babel, the Tower of Babel, the Tower of confused speech, was erected. Why did God feel so distressed about this building project? The people were all speaking the same language, the Torah says. Now, what could possibly be wrong with that? That's a good thing, right? Shai Held doesn't view this well-known story merely as a thwarted attempt by people to storm the gates of heaven. That's the usual kind of reading. Rather, Held sees, in my language, that we have a MacGuffin here. The words in the Torah used to describe this section are, everyone on earth had the same language and the same words. What happens when everyone on earth has the same language and the same words, and they have a propensity for evil? No. They were all members of the same family, right? They had spent almost an entire year, Noah's family and so forth, in that ark. Now, if you're from New England and I hear you speaking, I'm reasonably likely to know that you, in fact, have a New England accent. People in the same region do tend to speak alike. Why is that a problem? It's not, Held teaches, that they spoke the same language in the same way. The problem is that they used the same words. Let me try to explain. People using the same words have probably stopped thinking for themselves. They are embracing group think. And group think is an aspect of totalitarianism. When people adopt the same words as everyone else, they embrace conformity. They set aside their own thoughts, cautions, experience. They abandon creativity, and they reject individual responsibility. People using the same words have abandoned their own critical capacity. In a setting in which uniformity of speech is celebrated, individual tastes disappear, as do individual aspirations. When one of the Talmudic sages tried to describe what it was like to live during the time that the Tower of Babel was being built, that sage pretty much said the same thing as Held later on said. This sage imagined the following scene. If one of the builders of the tower slipped and fell off the tower down to the ground to his death, no one paid any attention. No one mourned. No one wept. Another one here, there, didn't matter. But when a wheelbarrow filled with building bricks slipped off the scaffolding and crashed to the earth, everyone stopped work and mourned. Where anonymity reigns, individual lives become interchangeable and thus without meaning or significance. What God found threatening was not a tower that ostensibly could reach up to heaven. That was just another example of foolish human arrogance. But when people stopped thinking for themselves, when people no longer saw serious value in another person's life, when thinking and speaking out of the box were considered to be wrong and dangerous, then no single person is B'Tselem Elohim. No single person is considered to be made in the image of God. Held calls it imposed homogeneity. Like that. Imposed homogeneity. Then individual choices to live a life as mandated by the divine will would become impossible when there is imposed homogeneity. And that was a threat to the divine plan that God found to be intolerable. I have read that one of the earliest targets for a totalitarian movement is control over what we think, how we think, and what words we actually use to express our thoughts. Our thoughts, our words, are the truest witnesses to the kind of people we are. Think of that. Our thoughts and our words are the truest witnesses to the kind of people we are. Do you hear that banging on our doors? We are entering an extremely dangerous period for our democracy. The air will be heavy with vituperative speech. The language of hate will come to dominate our country, maybe from now until Thanksgiving, God forbid, beyond. My friends, be thoughtful. Be careful with what you say and how you say it. Place your rational self in charge of your reptilian brain. Don't become a non-rational follower aligned with those who want you to think only their thoughts and to speak only in their words. That must be avoided. Maintain your autonomy. Have control over your sovereign self. We have no need to build towers. We have no need to surrender our own words. We have a nation to build, communities to strengthen, a rainbow-colored future to build. My friends, in these coming few weeks, be thoughtful, be careful, and then be prepared for a better time together. Remember those two words? Shabbat Shalom. And have a great, safe week. Shabbat Shalom.